No one has ever shown that human emissions of carbon dioxide drive global warming.
We have a massive power, and it's the power to say no.
They put all these words on these flyers and it means nothing. It's garbage.
We're all going to die!
Doctors are gaslighting patients.
If you keep silent, then this is what's going to happen. And they'll make us silent.
I would rather paper cut my eyelids than have anything to do with this.
I love that saying.
We are one people, one flag, one Australia.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the XCandidates. My name is Stephen Tripp, joined by Adam Zara. Adam, happy Easter. How was your break?
Well, happy Easter to you too, Stephen, and happy Easter to all of our people watching and our special guest that'll be on a bit later. Hey, Easter break is good. Who likes it? Who doesn't like a 4-day off weekend? How about yourself?
Well, I had to work. I've been doing 12-hour shifts every night. So, I guess there's a reward with that as well. But I want to start off with the t-shirt shop. If you want to head and support us and get your own XCandidates merchandise, head to xcandidates.tshirts.net.au. We'll put up a few more designs. When are your designs coming, Adam? You're the one that was big on the t-shirt idea.
Yeah, I have to speak to my designer. I'll give her a bell. I'll give her an email this week.
Big shout out also to Katie McCallum. Now, Katie jumped on to buy me a coffee and bought us 5 coffees. And she left this comment, Adam. She said, "Thank you so much for bringing a thought-provoking, interesting, funny, easy to understand podcast to the Australian people. Your conversations each week should be played in school rooms instead of that ABC rubbish behind the news." What do you think of that, Adam?
I think that's brilliant. I remember behind the news when it was actually news. When we were kids in school, we used to do that in primary school and have to write reports about what we used to watch. I'm sure that it's probably gone super woke and super different to unfactual and more about ideology than anything else now. But thank you very much. Really appreciate those contributions, and it just helps keep our show going because, you know, we have to pay for obviously StreamYard and just to keep bringing, interesting people and their stories, just like our special guests tonight.
Yeah, huge thank you to Katie. Katie's amazing, and I've had her on Commanding the Narrative before, so thank you very much, Katie. And she also jumped onto our Spotify and left this comment on last week's episode where we had a debate on libertarianism. She said, This convo left me scratching my head. I'm still at a loss in having a crystal clear concept of libertarianism. Maybe that's the issue. Stop seeking such a level of clarity. What were your takeaways from last week's episode, Adam?
Look, I think libertarianism has its place. I think I always call libertarianism like, and they hate me saying it, but it's more of like a conservative activists. So what happens is, I think that they, and I did mention this in the podcast, I think that they put the ideology before everything else. So it's ideology, people, and then everything else after that. So I think, if to keep their ideology true doesn't necessarily mean that it would be great for the Australian people. Like maybe 95 to 98% of it would be, but there's that 2% to keep the ideology going could be, maybe not in the best interests of the Australian people. So, I think we need to understand who we're voting for. I think that's a key issue. You need to understand who you're voting for. We wouldn't be in this situation and that we're in if everyone actually took an interest in politics and actually understood what they were voting for and who they were voting for, and hold them accountable. They tell you one thing, and then they do another thing. Okay, inside, don't forget too, everything's vague. The policies are vague, so they actually act on the policy that they put forward. You think it's one thing, and something else comes of it. Okay, then you need to hold them accountable and vote them out next time. And I don't think people actually do that. I think people go, they tried their best, or they're just Australian government. They don't know anything. They know. I got an Aussie mate. I got a mate. He's one of my best mates. I've had him. He's like my brother in arms, side by side for years. And he's just like, it's just the Australian government. They're a bunch of idiots that just don't know what they're doing. That's not true. That is not true. They know exactly what they're doing. They know that every little piece that they put in place is for their big agenda at the end. And that's why we're in the boat we're in. We can't just call them idiots and think it's, we don't want clowns running our show. We need to run our show. So get them out of the circus and let's turn it into a proper parade.
Okay, well, let's get into today's episode. We've got two very special guests, one returning guest in Jody Lowe, but also a young lady who has a very, I don't even know how to say it. I was going to say interesting, but it's more horrific than interesting. It's a very, it's a true representation of what people faced during the COVID pandemic, with the lockdowns and the mandates and all the draconian laws that were put into place during that time. And I think we need to constantly be reminding ourselves of what happened during that very surreal time, because a lot of it was so surreal, especially here in Australia, where we hadn't been faced with anything like that before. And it's so easy to move on with your life and try and put it behind you. But if we don't keep bringing these stories up, then there's never going to be any accountability for what some of these governments and health bureaucrats put in place. So let's bring on our special guests now. We have Jody Lowe returning, and also Mariya. Sorry, very, very nice to have both of you.
Nice to have both of you guys on.
Thanks, guys. Lovely to be on.
Good to be back.
So I'll just quickly start with you, Jody, because you've always got so much stuff going on and everything on your plate. What's happening with the National May Day that's coming up very soon next month, and also the Aligned Council of Australia?
Yeah, so the Aligned Council is ticking along well. We've got over 32 groups registered in the movement, basically trying to do what everybody's been talking about, which is unifying our actions more than all joining one party, as people would have you believe is necessary in the political space. So over 1 million members through their emails and subscribership, which is great. It means that we're actually starting to get out to the wider thing, and I'm going to call them closer to the middle. I'm a bit further over here to the Cooker conspiracy theorist area, but I represent the safe space in the middle, where the country sort of needs to wake up to what's sort of going on at the moment. So we've got a couple of events coming up that will lead up. Basically, they're all sequential events, stepping our interest to call to action, basically for the World Health Organization Pandemic Preparedness Treaty vote around the 28th of May or whatever it is. So that's really the guts of what we're doing with the National May Day call to action. There's a week of sort of activities, and a lot of the information when it goes out, when I put it out there, like for example, Saturday I did 7 hours worth of lives. So that's a lot of talking. But when that information sort of goes through so many different groups that I'm working with at the moment and going on so many different shows, a lot of it sort of starts doubling up. So you'll see that from tomorrow, there's a weekly movement leading up to that May Day to start drawing our money out of the bank, have cash ready for something that goes wrong, have cash conversations so people understand that cash is king in this country, and they don't let them go with the CBDC because it ties in nicely with the digital identity that they just push through. It's sort of creating grassroots stuff is what I like to do, and connecting people with the right people so that they can stay in their comfortable space of what they do, and we don't call it, we don't have to wear the same hat, the same shirt, and do it all walk and talk the same way. We do our own thing in this battle because everybody knows that we're attacked on every single level. That's where I'm at with that. Yeah.
No, awesome.
Excellent. And that's sorry, Stephen. And then we're meant to draw money out tomorrow. Everyone should go and draw, whatever they can out of the bank. Is that right?
Look, I've been doing it for a while. I went in the other day, and I'm happy to talk money, but I took a large sum of money out just for fun, and watched them squirm. And basically, the manager came out and told me, after I sort of went back and forth with the lady who wouldn't accept that it's none of her business what I'm doing with it. He came out and stood in the middle of the bank in front of other people and said, "Look, I'm going to have to report any of this action to the federal police because you could be using it for money laundering, for drugs." And I said to him, you're pretty lucky. You're pretty lucky that I'm in a tolerant mood at the moment, because I tell you what, if we're outside this business and you didn't have your CEO badge on, you're going to be, I reckon you'd be having trouble getting the next words out of your mouth if you ever talk about my business in public like that, using those sorts of words. So that's where we're at. right? If we go into a bank and get cash, and that's when I got serious with the whole cash thing, is like, I won't be told what I'm going to do with my money. And yeah, you can do your checks, but when a bank teller starts chastising me that I have to tell her what I'm doing with my money, I was like, cool. So I've been running that process in the background. This is Channel 9 picked this up the other night, and they were trying to make out like a bunch of crooked conspiracy theorists are going to go down and take $20 out, and we all know that equals about 540 million if every Australian took it out tomorrow, which is a drop in the ocean for the billions of profit that the banks Big Four made last year. But it's really about having that conversation to say to people, look, I'm going to go and start taking my money out of these Big Fours. I'm going to start looking for what is an Australian bank. And I'm going to start making sure that the profits at least stay in here. If we've got to pay for fees, let's make sure they stay in our country. Let's make sure that cash is actually utilised for small businesses. The day that the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy starts dropping off credit cards is the day that we've really gone south in this country.
Yeah, so I agree. And funnily enough, people are starting to wake up. So sorry, Maria, I'm just going to talk on this point for 1 second. My mum today, I had a bit of a family thing at my mum and dad's place today, and my mum goes, geez, I went to the bank the other day and I took out some money, and they kept asking me questions about what I'm going to do with my money. And and my mum's like, typical WOG, right? And she turned around and goes, well, it's my money and I'll do with what I please. And it was not a big amount. It's just they're retirees. Like, they haven't got, it's not like they're taking out, $10,000 or something like that, right? It was like literally maybe $500 or something, just to see them through the week, give a little bit of spending money to the kids and whatever that, their grandkids and whatnot, she's like, this is, she goes, look, ads, this is getting all a little bit, serious now, isn't it? I said, well, they just pushed the digital ID through. Okay, that means that they're going to try and get the, central banking system happening, which means that they'll be able to punish you on everything that you do and limit what you can have. And, I said to her, like, imagine this, if you're only allowed to have 100 grams of meat a week and you want to go and buy 200 grams, you won't be able to have you won't be able to do that transaction. They just won't let you simply pay for it with your digital currency. And she's like, oh, really? This is really serious. So I think the broader people are waking up. I hate that term. The broader people are aware now, and they are starting to see that, it's their money and they should be able to do with what they please with it, obviously within the parameters of the law. But what happens is, I think that if my mum's awake, like my mum's open to it and can see it happening, I think a lot more people can see what's going on than what's happening now.
Well, and I'll just finish as a segue into Maria's story is I want to make sure that everybody gets held accountable for what's gone on in the last 4 years and beyond that, now that I'm well and truly aware how long this has been going on. So I want to be aware. But what I'm also worried about is that as a conspiracy theorist that spends so much time online talking, I'm not going to have anything to do pretty soon because all my conspiracies will be done.
Yes.
So the segue into what I'm asking for with Maria's story is I'm going to start a foundation called growerset.com, or you can rent them. So I'm going to help people grow the balls back that used to be what underpinned the men in this country. And if not, they can rent them. I'm thinking 2-for-1 type deal. Get a free sack or something like that goes with it. And I'm sorry for the people out there. That's probably not what, I won't end up in your intro video where, we are one Australia. And I say 2-for-1 in a sack. Probably won't make it to the highlight reel. But
you never know. It could.
The men in this country have been asleep at the wheel, and I think it's disgusting. And that's why I needed to make sure that the right people, the people closer to the middle, heard the story of the young lady Maria. Because if this was my daughters, I'd be telling you it from the other side of some bars.
Yeah. Well, Maria, let's get into it. Let's hear your story. Maybe take us back to just before the start of 2020 and the start of the pandemic. What was life like for you?
It was a really, really dark time and an interesting time as well, because it was a big awakening for a lot of people, including myself. And 2020 was when I realized that everything that we were fed to believe was actually a lie. All of our systems, all of our governments. So that was a really rude shock. But in 2021, I became very active, as you'd probably what you'd call a activist, and really wanted to actually do something rather than just talk, because everyone from the freedom movement was, talking and complaining, but not everyone was taking a lot of action. So we actually formed a group, a few of us in South Australia. This group started and called Informed Choice Network. And it was a few of us, some lawyers. I come from a HR background, some ex-aged care workers, some admin workers. So we all came together and we joined a group to try and help people who were affected by the mandates. This was purely in the workplace. And so through that, obviously, I got a little bit more awareness and more traction in terms of my name. I'm sure nswpol became very well aware of me. And that was when the fun began, when the journey started.
Yeah, wow.
So the big thing for you was you went on holiday, you went up to the Northern Territory, and you struggled to get back. Is that right?
Yeah, so I took my mum up to Northern Territory for a holiday for her birthday. We went up together, and on the way home, literally the day that we were planned to return back to South Australia, we were driving. And this was like a first holiday in a long time, because obviously we were all locked in our own little states, treated like we were living in separate countries. And the day that we were returning back, the Premier of South Australia, Steve Marshall, made an announcement that the border was closed for any unvaccinated residents or unvaccinated travellers entering the state.
So he just closed, like, so what? Just wakes up one morning and goes, screw it, we're going to close it and just shut the borders. There was no time limit, because we were down the south coast in New South Wales, and we had family come up from Victoria, and I think this was when it was the first like shutouts and lockdowns and stuff like that. Anyway, and then they shut the border. They were meant to be together for a week, and then Victoria shut their border, and then you had till midnight to get there. So they shut the border at something like they announced it at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and everyone kept checking their phones, and you service New South Wales or service Victoria or whatever it is, and they got that warning that okay, the border's going to get shut down at midnight. Like you all need to come back. Too bad if you were further away than say 5 or 6 hours. Basically what happens is they just packed their stuff and shot straight down back home to get back across the border. But this was a bit of a different scenario. This wasn't like the COVID lockdowns where the borders were being closed for COVID. He just kind of like separately shut down the borders.
It was for COVID, but see, in South Australia, we were under the Emergency Management Act. So the directions came under the emergency management. In a lot of the other states, it was under the public health. Not that it really makes big difference whether it's one or the other, but they treated it like it was, a state of emergency in South Australia. And so under this state of emergency, that was declared by our police commissioner. So it was actually everything. All the orders came through the police commission, not through the health, not through SA Health like in other states. And so he made these new directions. I think in the end it was something like 68 new directions or 70 directions in that 2 years that we lived through that nightmare. So a new direction would be, due to end, and then they would issue a new one. So this was just a new direction that came out, and they decided that they didn't want to. It was like a big announcement. Oh, we're opening up the borders for all international travellers, but only if you're vaccinated. So yeah, it was quite interesting. I remember my mum and I, we were in a hotel at the time, and they had this online system that you had to use to register yourself, and it would then grant you either entry into the state or deny you entry into the state. So my mum couldn't even log into that system. That's how poorly it was set up. So, you know, it wasn't even a matter of attempting to use it. You couldn't even log in. So we just decided we're going to drive to the border and we'll have a discussion with them there and then.
See, this is the crazy part of it all, because a lot of these directions that they imposed were just made up on the spur of the moment, and there's been no accountability for any of them. I always say, where's this health advice that the Premier's relying on? Where was it documented? Was it written down on a napkin on somewhere? Was it whispered in someone's ear, or was it actually properly documented on where they were getting their evidence to make these decisions? If you're going to close a border, why are you closing the border? What are you trying to prevent? And if you're just closing it for the unvaccinated, well, we know now that these vaccines weren't even tested to stop transmission. So what's the whole point of blocking out unvaccinated people?
Well, exactly. And there are no borders. So one of my really good friends, Darren, and biggest supporters throughout this whole process that I went through, he actually explained to me really well. I understood the Constitution, and that's the highest law of this land. So under the Constitution, there are no borders. We are one country, and we're treated as one country, and the only border is the sea. So between the sea and us, other than that, you can travel freely, and that's what our constitutional rights actually give us, the ability to travel freely, to speak freely, to breathe freely. So all of these basic human rights is what was actually breached, as we all know. You know, we couldn't breathe without wearing a mask. We couldn't cross the border without being double vaccinated. We couldn't go into a medical facility without getting a human experiment. So, so all of our fundamental constitutional rights were broken.
So walk us through, let's just walk us through the night, because it sounds like everyone loves a good road trip, right? So, and Stephen and I have done a few road trips, you know, through this whole, you know, since we've become mates and all that kind of stuff. And so talk us through it a little bit. So, you know, you're coming up to the border, you've received, luckily enough, it coincided with the day that you were finishing the holiday anyway. So you're ready to drive home, and you just, you know, so you're heading down to the border. What did you expect? Like, what were you expecting? Like, just a conversation with some sort of like a border patrol, or what was it like when you were like heading to the border of South Australia?
So the funny thing is the checkpoint where they had this police station set up, which is called Marla checkpoint. It's a few hours into the South Australian border between NT and SA. You had to drive 2 hours into the state. So you were already in South Australia, yet you couldn't drive any further. So we drove quite a substantial time from where we were, where our accommodation was. And upon entering the border in South Australia, they had this big sign which virtually said, like, unvaccinated residents, unvaccinated travellers won't be granted entry. So a lot of people may have already been put off, even coming in from that. But as we drove in, there was 2 police officers. It was tiny little setup on the side of the road near a petrol station. And this police officer that was at the border, he was very naive and, just so quite nicely said to us, but all you have to do is be double vaccinated, it's not a big deal. And it's like such a surprise they didn't have a vaccination clinic set up there, right there and then. But the other funny thing is, even let's say if you were to get vaccinated, it's not like you can get double vaccinated at the same time. Not that that's anything we would ever have done. But so it's not like anyone would be able to enter in anyway. So they're just really, it was very much like very similar to what happened to the Jews during World War II. So we arrived to the station or to the checkpoint, and the conversation started with the police, and they said, well, you're actually going to have to turn back to Northern Territory. And my mum and I, you know, very strong Ukrainian independent women, said, no, we're not turning back. You can call your authorities and find a way to let us in. So they tried to get us to contact SA Health. Well, SA Health was closed by this time, so I couldn't get through to them, couldn't get through to the National Helpline. And in the end, after about 2.5 hours, we actually said to them, we'll just pitch a tent there. So we're going to become your liability now. Yeah, and what's really interesting is the police car, the South Australian police car, says keeping people safe on it. But they actually wanted to send 2 females back to the Northern Territory border, which was about, you know, at least a 2-hour drive back to the checkpoint, because the Northern Territory checkpoints also you have to drive in to the border, only to realise that in Northern Territory, we only knew this because there was another lady who was one of us who also hadn't been vaccinated. She had already done this. They sent her back to the Northern Territory that day, and Northern Territory sent her back because they had a hard border closure, because they just had a outbreak in Catherine Springs, I think it was, up north. So they did a hard border closure and were only letting in Northern Territory residents. So, you know, it was all different rules for different states, but they were
letting in residents.
Sorry?
They were letting in residents.
NT was letting in residents.
And were they able to be vaccinated or non-vaccinated? Didn't matter, as long as you were a resident,
I'm pretty sure NT was letting in residents, yeah.
But what happened to you essentially was you had to drive 2 hours to this checkpoint. They say we're not letting you in. And if you had turned around and gone back to the Northern Territory border, they wouldn't have let you in. So you were in a limbo. You were in a no man's land.
That's exactly where we were. We were in no man's land. And this lady who was South Australian had already done that trip and proved it to us. So because that had happened, they let us in to South Australia on compassionate grounds, you know, our own returning residents coming back to their home. On compassionate grounds. So
they let you in on compassionate grounds, which is like such a lie and stuff anyway, because the fact of the matter is that that's your home. That's that you are like a resident there, you live there, that's your home, and it actually was stopping you. Couldn't you take them up like on kidnapping charges or something like that?
Well, even the funnier thing is that they told us, so it's from the checkpoint to Adelaide, it's about a 14-hour drive. So they told us we weren't allowed to stop at any petrol stations. We weren't allowed to stop at any public places. So we went, okay, so how are we going to get fuel and go to the toilet and drink?
Hey, what happens if you had an electric vehicle?
Oh, mate, if you had an EV, that's it.
It was, really quite laughable. And when we actually said to them, you do realise this doesn't make sense. Oh, okay, yes, all right. Well, when you enter the petrol station, you have to make sure you put a mask on and don't interact with anyone. And you know,
or a star on your jumper.
Yellow star.
A yellow star. Like that. Either that, a mask or a star. One of those two to identify yourself.
Yeah,
and make sure, and you have to make sure that you had your papers saying that you're an essential worker, and you have to make sure that you had your QR code for them to scan. You know,
well, that wasn't even enough, because I was technically considered a industry that I worked in was considered essential, and that's what I tried to get entry granted on. But they still denied me entry despite that. So it really didn't matter. All they wanted is you to have those 2 shots, proof that you had those 2 shots. And even then, so there were people who had been double vaccinated, but they had to still quarantine. So we were in the caravan park that we were staying in Northern Territory. There was a few families that said, well, there's no point of us going into South Australia because we're still not going to be able to do anything for 2 weeks. We still have to quarantine for 2 weeks because we're double vaccinated. So, and so prior to the 23rd of November, they had completely different regulations, like a different direction. So, yeah, it was changing on a daily basis.
Can I just ask what time of the day this was? Because I've done some driving in the Northern Territory, and it was probably mid-afternoon when we were going to do maybe a 2 or 3 hour drive, and the locals were saying, "You have to go now. You can't drive at night," because and we're like, "Why? Like, what's so bad about driving at night?" And they said, as soon as the sun goes down, the kangaroos come out, and it can be actually quite dangerous driving at night because the kangaroos will just drive, just jump straight into your path. I mean, if the South Australian police were directing you to drive back into the Northern Territory, and I guess it is getting close to dark, isn't that dangerous, especially for two women?
Well, it's for them, it wasn't about keeping people safe. I think it was about keeping people vaccinated. That was really, the ultimate direction that they were given. But yeah, it was about around 6, 7 o'clock when we arrived to the border. So it was getting dark, and it absolutely bucketed down the day that when we were granted compassionate grounds, driving back to Adelaide. It was just like a thunderstorm with endless rain. It was like, something was telling us from the higher being, that higher powers above.
He was, I don't know if he's crying with sorrow for your situation and other people's situation like that, or was he crying with laughter of how stupid it all is? But second of all, all right, so it's almost like that movie where, Tom Hanks did that movie where he's at the terminal, where an international traveler travels, and then the country falls, and then he's got no country to go to, so his passport's invalid, so he can't leave. He couldn't leave the United States because he had no country to go to, so he was basically invalid and had to live in the terminal for so long until I think somebody could grant him on compassionate grounds citizenship back to that country and send a passport through or something like that. So that's very like your story. All right, so your story is like, it's terrible and harrowing because it's just it's the stupidest thing. Like, all right, you just want to smash your head against the brick wall, honestly. All right, so now you've finally made it back to South Australia. You've been granted compassionate grounds re-entry into your home state, so you can go home and then try to carry on with your life, right? You had to quarantine for 2 weeks.
Yes. So no. This is where the fun began. So the directions that we were given were completely conflicting. So at the border, we were told 7 days, and then we were communicated 7 days. And then these directions started changing, when we arrived back to South Australia, and evolving. And, it was extended because we weren't, at the time, they only had PCR tests. Yep. So because we didn't want to have an experimental test either, there was a huge limelight on my mum and I, more so even myself than my mum. So from the day that we entered back into South Australia, there wasn't a lot of travellers at the time. It was a real quiet period for travelling, and there was hardly any new cases. But there was this huge, big focus on South Australia, being treated like a police state because we're going to have this massive outbreak, even though there's no new cases, and but there were so many existing cases apparently. So our house where my mum and I were living was monitored on a daily basis. We had police coming to our house sometimes 3 times a day. I would say almost every day. We had police jumping over the fence. We had police knocking on all the windows, looking through all the windows. So it was really like a true Nazi state. And coming to my workplace, talking to my colleagues, trying to build a profile about me even. So they were really, really after, wanting to make an example out of myself because there wasn't many people challenging the system. There wasn't a lot of unvaccinated travelers at all. And obviously being younger as well, they really wanted to make an example. I don't know if my age is a big factor in this, but I think in South Australia, we're a really aging population, so very compliant. So as a result of that, there wasn't a lot of younger people. It's not like Queensland where, you guys are a lot more active in Queensland. New South Wales, there's more people.
Can I just add that, Mariya, don't undersell that age thing too, because, like they knew that like in Queensland, it was so many old people sort of saying, I remember back in the day, we didn't have this. So they knew very well that you're the kind of face and the voice of that would activate a lot more young people to wake up to what was going on with us, right? We're a compliant young nation these days, 30 and under. They've never seen anything like this. So, I mean, personally, I think that was the biggest factor in it, was your age and the fact that you're active and you knew what you were talking about. Because if we had that age group activated during that time, it would have been a whole game. It would have been a whole different game. You know what I mean? So that's just my opinion. But I think it has it had to be proven and yada yada. But it plays a big part compared to an old dusted head like this going, don't do what you're told. To be expected. So.
I guess all revolutions in the past were always started by younger uni students, weren't they? That was always the case. Men often, and women as well. But
plus they were targeting young people, saying, if you go out and spread this thing, you're going to kill your grandparents.
Yeah.
So that messaging was going on. What did you get a sense with all these police officers that you're having interactions with, either at the border or coming to your home? Did you get a sense of how they were feeling? Were some of them sympathetic to you, or were others just enjoying, I guess, their new powers?
So I must admit, the ones that were on this task force, the COVID task force, most of them were pretty ruthless. They, they were all actually, a lot of them were a lot younger, it was the younger ones that had not a lot of, were easily, I guess, molded. And there was a particular police officer who had it in for me because I had already met him in 2020, and he tried to close down my workplace where I was working. And so as a result of that, he wasn't effective in closing that because I challenged that a direction isn't law. And he wasn't able to effectively fine me. He wanted to fine me $20,000, close down the business. So because he wasn't able to do that, he went after me. And this played a big role as to why what happened to me happened. I mean, South Australia, Adelaide is not a big city. Like I said, there's not a lot of active people in terms of younger people. All of our freedom movements really are driven by, 50, 60-year-old women. That's really the active freedom movement in South Australia. So it really made anyone who didn't fall into, who was younger really stood out. There were still some decent police officers, like the guy who was at the border. He genuinely was oblivious to everything. He's tried to grant us entry. He didn't understand what the big issue was, why he was giving these instructions to implement those directions on us. At the same time, he couldn't understand why we weren't vaccinated. It's just so easy. Everyone's getting it done. What's the big deal? But there were a lot of ruthless ones. We had undercover cops coming to our place as well. So they really, they put all of their funds. It's unbelievable how much money, public funds, was wasted on this.
So what's funny about that, Mariya, is that, sex offenders get a bracelet put around their ankle and then they're free to move within certain parameters outside of their home. So you only, the only crime that you had committed was not having an experimental mRNA gene therapy injected into your body twice. Okay, so like you've just basically said, no, I'm expressing my free will of bodily autonomy, and I don't accept this particular injection. And basically you were locked down harder and basically treated like a criminal, were worse than a sex offender or a drug lord or whatever it is. So you were basically really imprisoned in your home.
Mm-hmm. Literally, yes. Yeah, and as we go along, I'll tell you something that's very closely aligned with what you're saying, because on a particular day when something happened, there was a criminal that was let out on bail, and the judge that made a decision about that, I think he was trafficking drugs and he was let out on bail, but myself, for example, it was a completely different situation that applied to it.
Jody, I might just get a comment from you, because we're hearing this story from Mariya, and I can see you just almost fuming there listening to it, and hearing these stories about police confronting women that are basically locked in their homes. And look, I don't want to paint women as vulnerable, but in a lot of for a man, there's almost a biological thing within us that we want to protect women, and we want to look after women. And when we hear stories of other men treating women in this way, it's infuriating. It's almost something that we can't control. It's just within us that goes, okay, no, this is not right. When you hear this story and other stories that happen during the pandemic, how does that make you feel as a man?
I have 4 daughters. One of them's probably only a few years younger than Mariya. I have my wife and one of my little girls. My other 3 are released out into the wild. My 3 girls. My mum lives with me now. None of us are vaccinated. The oldest 3 got advice off their mother, and they took it against my wishes. So anybody that comes near my children in that manner will find out. And to hear these stories of how often that it's not just a husband's duty, a father's duty, a brother's duty, a son's duty to look after the women in their life, because women need looking after. That's the role they take. My dog will bark at the fence until I say, stand down, and I will do the same for my family. When my wife tells me that someone's had enough of these, usually I will stop. And so, I'm not saying that they need to, they need us for some sexual, Neanderthal reason. That's just what I do. I will look after the loved ones in my life, and if that is women getting taken advantage of, bigger, stronger men, particularly in uniform, then they need to be held accountable for it. I don't care. How does their family, ask them, "Hey, honey, how was your day today?" Fantastic. I bullied and belittled a young lady for standing her medical grounds. Like, whether it's a law or not, how you go about it's a different thing. And this is the video. I was making the video, trying to make a video for you today that had this video here with the girl that she didn't wear a mask. So this is the Australian police force. This is how they treated her because she didn't wear a mask. So I made a video by that. By the time I made a 12-minute series of about 15 videos watching this pig, watch this, this sort of stuff. By the time I was so done, I'm glad I had a meeting to take my mind off it before I came to this, to sort of calm myself down. But I was so weaponized. And this is what they want. They want us to react badly so that they can call themselves the victims of us fighting back. They can weaponize us. They can use LRADs against us. They can use, draconian lockdown measures and use weaponized words against us to make us look like the crazy people, and allow that to happen to the ladies in there. Man, I was gutted when I heard her story the first time around. And like I said, I saw my daughters in that face and thought, if I was ever a man in my life and sitting back and having to listen to my daughter tell that story, I was like, you cowards, you men that let that happen, you are cowards. And you police officers that take part of that, you are disgusting and you have no place in my country. and I will fight until we find you and you are exited out of this building. That's where I'm at with it. You know, like, I will not go down without a fight. You will not be nameless. We will find who you are, and you will know through the court systems of the Constitution, if that's what it has to be, that'll never happen in this country again. That's me. Right, we got it off now. I'll go back. Calm down.
But why didn't they just wave you through? Like, seriously, like, what? Just what's a couple of hours? They should have just waved you through, Mariya. Go on then.
Well, the thing is, even if we went in on the 22nd, I don't know if I think they actually had a hard border closure to all travellers. So they started allowing vaccinated non-South Australians in. But before that, they had a closed border for all travellers. So, which is funny because you were able to leave the state, but coming back, you don't know. So I think in the time away, there had been 3 different directions. How do you keep up with that? How does any person keep up with that? And to that point, what's so funny is the police couldn't keep up with their own stupid rules, and that's how they were so this case really played in my advantage because they were so tied up in their own lies, in their own misleading directions, and in their fraudulent system that in the end, we all know that the truth always wins, and you can't really deny what's written on paper. So...
Well, the truth wins, but unfortunately, we're speaking about you being locked down and confined in your house. But the next step of this story gets even worse. So, do you want to go on into what happens next?
Yes. So, what happens next is after being locked in our own, virtually under house arrest for days on end. Because we were both not getting the PCR test. At that point in time, we were told that it was going to be continuously extended. So the quarantine period, there was no end in sight. Too bad if you've got plans for Christmas, because it was coming up to Christmas. It was now December. Too bad, if you have to go to work. And they don't fund any of this time off work. So it's not like they pay for your time at home. It's not like they pay for your food, your living expenses. Who's going to look after your pets? Who's going to walk your dogs? We had dogs, they didn't get walked for days and days and days. You can't even come have anyone visit you because you're so, such a high risk, even though none of us even, had any signs of sickness or flu. So you can't have anyone come and do anything for you. So you really are, you were just targeted as this deadly unvaccinated South Australians at that point in time. So I decided against my free will to leave that morning to a testing clinic and find out what my rights are. And the day that I drove out that morning, SA Police had already gone around the whole neighbourhood and left call cards for all of the neighbours to tell them that if they see anyone leave this home, to call the police.
Oh my God.
So the day that I left, I had the police pull me over, and 2 officers. One of them was the one that I was telling you about, and I'm happy to publicly name and shame him. His name is Peter Sekafine. He was the one who arrested me and pulled over my car and told me that I breached the COVID directives for leaving my home that day. Having said that, no questions were asked of me. Where I was going, what I was doing, was it an emergency? Could be for a million different reasons. Getting tested, it could be to get vaccinated, it could be because your house is on fire, it could be you know, because your dog needs to see an emergency vet. It could be because you're having a heart attack.
Yeah.
None of those questions were asked. It was simply, you are arrested, step out of your car.
Did one of your neighbours dob you in?
Later, I found out that it was the next door neighbours.
That's so un-Australian. Just in that point alone, right? If anyone, I would burn my neighbour's house down if they dobbed me into something for.
Well, what was that old saying, Adam? Aussie Australians don't dob in their mates. There used to be a saying like you just didn't matter if they would. I mean, obviously, if they murdered someone, you would, but like if it was something else, you just didn't do that. You
Something
didn't do that.
stupid, like leaving your house because I don't know, you just wanted to burn a bit of fuel. Like who cares, right? You just want to just go for a drive. I've been stuck. I've been stuck in my house for 2 weeks. I can't even stand near a window without seeing a copper shine a bloody torchlight in there, and I've gone out. But you said you were going to a clinic to get a testing clinic to find out your rights.
That's right. Yes. So as I was driving on the way back from the testing clinic, I got pulled over, and I got arrested. And because I didn't want to step out of my car because I genuinely feared for my life, because there was 2 male police officers who were being quite aggressive in their nature towards me, they then had another 5 police officers arrive to the scene, all men, of course, as well. And at this point in time, I had no choice but to step out of the vehicle because I didn't want them to touch me. That was the only option, was for them to physically remove me. As soon as I stepped out of my car, I was no longer a threat. So they no longer wanted to handcuff me. They no longer wanted to, oh, no, it's fine. We're not going to handcuff you. Just, step to this side. And we are treating you as a risk. So I had to go into the back of a paddy wagon, so not even a police station. And this was, an experience I'll never forget, going to the City Watch House, which is something I didn't even know exist.
Did they drive calmly and smoothly when you were in the back of the paddy wagon? Because I've heard some stories where they'll throw, one of the drunks in the street, and then they, touch them up a little bit by, steering crazy and driving a bit fast?
I had a lot of things running through my head at the time, so I don't think I wasn't really focusing on the driving so much.
No, but you weren't tossed around the back at all? From memory?
I can't remember. I can't recall.
All right, that's all right. No, fair enough. I know it's traumatic for you, but I'm just saying, I just want to see, that you weren't getting even more abused kind of thing. Yes.
So then upon arriving to the City Watch House, I was such a high risk. I had all these police officers touching me up and down, trying to, see if I had gunpowder, drugs on me, because I'm such, a high-fledged criminal, even though my arrest wasn't because of drugs or gun related. So they breached their own rules because they weren't wearing masks, they weren't wearing gloves, and I was exchanged between multiple hands at this point in time. And I was then denied bail, and I was denied bail twice. Now, unfortunately, when all of this happened, I didn't have my mobile phone on me, so I wasn't actually even able to contact anyone to let them know what happened to me. Obviously, my mum realised that I wasn't returning home, and it had been a significant amount of time, and some friends came and found me. They found out where I was, and they came and visited me. So this was a funny thing, is what they were told at the police station was a completely different story to what I was told. So they were advised that I was going to be offered bail, and the potential of, following that on release rights, being released. And what actually happened was I was never even given the option to apply for bail. So it was instantly declined. So no option to get interviewed. Apologies, not bail. So they asked, so usually if you get anyone can get arrested for anything. They can be suspicious suspects or, be supposedly suspicious of a crime. But what you have to do is you have to take then the precautions of the process of questioning that person and getting to the bottom of making an assessment. Are they actually, going to assist you with that crime, or we're going to consider them a suspect of whatever's happened? But I haven't actually committed any crime because I haven't harmed anyone. What is a crime? It's causing someone physical harm. There was no physical harm caused.
No, because so far all you've done is drive home from being on holiday.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you were quarantined and then you left the property. So okay, so all right, keep going. So and then what happened after that?
So denied the opportunity for an interview, declined bail, and the next day, so I stayed there overnight, and next to me there was actually, a murder case, a drug case, so really high risk cases and suspects. And the day that my hearing was listed, they purposely listed my hearing the last hour of the day. So no one knew. Everyone was in limbo as to when it was going to be heard. And the lawyer that was supposed to represent me wasn't there at the time that it was listed for hearing, because she had been waiting all day. So she left. So I had a junior solicitor representing me, and her only argument was that I was a young female. That was her only argument, not the fact that I had no criminal record, not the fact that this isn't lawful, not the fact that there was conflicting directions, not the fact that we actually completed our quarantine period of 7 days, which we were given both in writing and verbally. So nothing was in fact breached. And the fact that they're all so reliant on your ignorance, they don't actually read the law themselves. And the law says something that you actually cannot be imprisoned for this breach. It can only be an expiable offence. So anyone in South Australia who had breached any COVID directions, because we weren't the only ones, or alleged to have breached, they were issued with a fine. But for some reason, the same didn't apply for myself. So the day of my hearing, the magistrate that was listed for the hearing decided that he was going to send me to the Adelaide Women's Prison because I was such a high risk to South Australia.
I know. So I'm really sorry because I'm only laughing because you're laughing.
Yes.
But I guess you'd cry, right? Like you'd cry if you didn't laugh. So far out.
Yeah, very gut-wrenching for both my mum and I, and all our family and our friends as well, because usually
but your mum wasn't involved. Sorry, your mum wasn't included in any of this, right? So it was just you at this point.
She was at home. She was in home. She was still in home arrest at home. Under house arrest at home. So while all of this was happening with me, she couldn't leave the house to do anything, to go seek a solicitor, to, do whatever needs to be done. And there was police still coming to the house the day that I was arrested, threatening her that they would arrest her, threatening that they would shoot the dogs. That was one of the things that was mentioned to my mum as well. And there were other things that happened as well. So really, really trying to threaten her hard as well. Understanding obviously that we're both women, and it's very easy to try and use that against us. So when I was sent to prison, I wasn't actually convicted. So usually in order for you to be sent to prison, you have to be convicted. But this, again, doesn't go by any rule of law. So sent to the Adelaide Women's Prison in the highest level security, isolation, with no conviction, indefinitely.
Indefinitely.
Well, that's how it works. Until you get bailed out, you stay there. So, unfortunately, people who don't are in less fortunate circumstances than I, as in meaning that they might not have a mother, a father, a partner, a friend bailing them out, they stay there for months and months, because a lot of them you have to use the state. State lawyers will adjourn the matter. And, while I was in there, I met quite a few people who were in there for months for traffic offences.
Oh, yeah. And, traffic offences, that's a whole different other story, because most of our prison population is by people who've committed traffic offences, from one of the driver safety courses I did once. But just with that, so you're in maximum security prison and you were in isolation.
Yeah, so I couldn't leave. I wasn't allowed to leave my cell. I wasn't allowed to go outside. And every single day I was offered, or should I say, they tried to convince me to get double vaccinated, and they tried to force me to get tested.
And did you, with that, did you thank your lucky stars that you were in isolation though? Because I couldn't imagine being put into Gen Pop. Like that would, I'm scared of prison. I don't ever want to go there. If I was going to go to prison, I'd probably want to be in isolation. So do you think that was at least one good thing?
Look, I don't know. I've never been to prison. My biggest fear was going in there. I was worried that they were going to mandate prisoners to get vaccinated.
Yeah.
That was, what was running through my head, thinking that you don't have any rights as a someone who is, behind closed bars, that's so to say. And, in a way it was, I guess maybe, I don't know. I don't know what a different experience would have been like, but it definitely wasn't not a nice experience, that's for sure.
Oh, no. I mean, nothing's nice about prison. Sorry, go, Jody.
No, I was just going to say, the cold, hard reality was your mum was probably safer from threat in the cell beside you than what she was in her own home, with those pigs going around there still continuing to harass her. And that's the sad part about it, is at least with the camera systems, unless you're, Jeffrey Epstein, who just happened to have one turn off. But, the cold, hard reality is that she was better off in there in a safer environment, because those pricks were going around there continuing to, threaten a lady, stuck around. Don't get me wrong. An older Ukrainian lady probably would have been able to shank him with the chicken bone out of the soup that she just made anyway, I'd imagine. So she probably comes from a much harder sort of frame of mind than we do. But, I just, it's getting to the stage where for our elderly, they would be better off being in jail. It's 3 squares, security cameras, free education, obviously exercise. The country's got to that bad for the people in it, that sometimes that better off. And for you, Adam, I mean, unlimited sex is always got to be something that's beneficial if you went to if you did go to prison. So, there's always the upside of that. There, mate.
That's the scariest part of it.
But sometimes you push the wheelbarrow, sometimes you are the wheelbarrow. That's the way it's going to go from there, I guess. So, but I'm not taking anything away from Mariah's story. I've got to put some jovial nature into it, because I can't. This is the second time I've heard it, and I was like, oh, maybe it'll get easier if you hear it again. This young lady lived it, and nothing has changed. Nothing. There has been has anybody been held accountable for this so far, Mariah?
Well, that's the thing is, it was really crimes against humanity, and everyone's just trying to cover it under the desk, so as to say now. I don't think, all these criminals, all these politicians, why are none of those premiers, prime ministers in power anymore? Because they don't want to be liable for this. So it's easier for them to go and hide. and put someone new in, so as to say that, I'm no longer in power, so therefore there's no course of action that can be taken against me. But we will hold them accountable. We will hold them liable, especially the ones that did it full knowingly. And, I would say that probably at least 70% of those enforcing it, they knew exactly what they were doing.
So Marie, you were in prison for 12 days, is that correct?
13
days. So 13 days, maximum security. Okay, you're in prison. So now, obviously, you're not in prison because we're speaking to you. What happened? So after that, so you've been basically charged but not convicted. Is that correct? You were basically charged but not convicted.
Well, what happens is that, obviously, because I had never gone through this experience before, never ever been charged, never been to prison. Once you get out on bail, you then have charges. Then you have to start fighting the charges. So you go through the process of the court hearings, and if you take it all the way to the end, there's a trial, or the other option is to plead guilty. That was never an option for me because I knew that nothing that I ever did was wrong. Everything that I did was right. I stood by my truth, and I was going to take it as hard as it was all the way to the end. And I was really lucky. I did have really good support. So special mention to Darren Dixon, special mention to some other people in South Australia that were behind me, a lot of support, my mum as well. So I was, because they wanted to make an example out of me. If they could make an example, they had already made an example out of me by obviously arresting and imprisoning me. I don't believe there was many people that happened to in South Australia. I really only know one other lady who served time in prison for not wearing a mask. But she didn't eat or drink, so they released her almost soon after. In my situation, they obviously wanted me to plead guilty and for it to be, for them to justify their reasons, because they needed to cover up their crime, because really they've committed a crime against me, against South Australia. So they desperately wanted a conviction, and all evidence shows that that's really it's nothing to do with justice. It was nothing to do with keeping South Australia safe. It was just a very, very political agenda.
I can imagine this was a very surreal time for you, because it was surreal for all of us. I mean, especially this period of late 2021 leading into 2022, because every day the premier from whichever state you were living on would get on the TV at the same time every day, surrounded by the health minister and the chief health officer, and they would continually ramp up the restrictions, and it was getting more draconian and more draconian. And for a lot of us, we didn't know where it was going to end. We didn't know how bad it was going to get. And you talked about you being concerned about them forcing the vaccine upon you. Well, how many steps away were we from that actually happening? You were the next level from what we were all experiencing. You're in maximum security. I can't even imagine what was going through your mind and the emotions that you were feeling at that time. I'm sure that you broke down at stages, but were you surprised at maybe some inner strength that you found during that whole process, and how you were able to cope? Because speaking to you now, I mean, this was a horrific traumatic experience that you had, but there's a serenity about you. So you seemingly are able to process all of this. But did you find some inner strengths that you hadn't realized that were there before?
It was very hard. I mean, I didn't know what how long was I going to stay there for? Because it was really coming up very close to Christmas, and they shut down everything over Christmas and the public holidays. So did that mean that I was going to be there in the new year? Obviously, the days are very, very long. And I think the strength was knowing that I really wanted to make sure that we were going to be on the right side of history, and to, at the end of the day, I wasn't willing to give in. As there were times where it was just as hard for my mum, who was on the other side, trying to fight for me to get me to bail me out of prison, and all of family and friends who were helping with that. Probably even harder for them, because they knew, for me it was just, they didn't let me talk to anyone because I was not double vaccinated. So you had to be double vaccinated to Zoom someone. So I wasn't. So this is how
because that they would have done that to manipulate the prisoners. So that would be
really sad thing. Everyone who walked into that jail, the cells, the area that I was in, because I was in the highest security, all the I shouldn't call them prisoners, people who walked through there, they all got vaccinated, sadly, each one of them, because they were pushing it so hard. And this is where it was actually the nurses in these prison facilities, they were coming in every day, and I was told, like a carrot on a stick, you will be able to only see the daylight if you get tested, and if you get double vaccinated, you'll be able to talk to your family and friends. So they would have used exactly the same rationale on all the other people. And, to the point where I actually said, well, this is rape. I don't, I don't agree with this. I'm not putting anything into my body because it's equivalent to rape. And that's when the nurse heard that was the first time that I think she went, oh, okay, all right.
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. I understand the gravity of this situation now. In her maybe mind.
That's right. So to get anything in prison as well, you had to have a mental health plan. So they wanted to put you down to someone who was crazy. Yeah. So what was unlimited in prison was unlimited drugs. They wanted to put me on sleeping pills very hard. They were really pushing to put me on medication. Unlimited TV. So you could watch all the news that you wanted to get brainwashed on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And what else? Unlimited vaccines and unlimited tests. So those things were unlimited. Everything else was limited.
Mariya, is it over now for you? Like, is this whole ordeal, like, obviously not the mental scarring from it, but what I'm saying is like is the court processes over, or are you still fighting? Are you still trying to hold them accountable? Did you try and contact Alex, Senator Alex Antich to see if he could do something about it? Or did he even try? Because, he's against all this kind of stuff, and he's all about minimal government and, bodily autonomy. Did he even hear about one of his fellow South Australians, going through this ordeal and maybe do something about it himself?
Well, what's really interesting, you actually mentioned Alex Antich's name. I'd got in touch with Alex Antich when all of this was happening to me. He wasn't interested in hearing my story. He didn't want anything to do with it. And so the same thing happened, nothing of the same level of severity happened to him, but he was under hotel quarantine when he was returning back to South Australia. So that was one big reason I reached out to him. But what made me realise is a lot of, not all, because obviously I know that we're talking to ex-politicians here too, but there was a lot of politicians who wanted to be painted in a limelight, like they were helping they were helping people. But when you reached out to them, another really good one is Monica Smith. She did nothing, reached out to her. Yeah. So they all it's all about painting a name for themselves and their personal agenda. But when it actually came to wanting something happen, like, all this talk put into action, they weren't there. So it was really, really disappointing. That was, in answer to your question, it really has been a real life-changing event that's happened. So many things as a result have affected me, my life, how I see things, my perspective, friendship circles, and you really know who the people are who are standing up for the truth. And most of those, unfortunately, politicians were not all of them. I'm not discounting all of them, but the ones that I had reached out to who were, really speaking up about this were not helpful.
Did any of them help at all? I know you met Jody through this, and Jody's tried to bring your story to the forefront. But are there any influencers or politicians or maybe media personalities that did try and help you, even if it was just behind the scenes?
There are no, I don't believe anyone who has, I guess, reached that level of influencing ability that they have, that genuinely, are doing something for your goodwill. It has to be something in exchange for their agenda that they're wanting, whether it's to promote their profile. But who I had who really, really helped me, and I've already mentioned his name, but Darren. So Darren Dixon, he was, I believe, helping a lot towards the Great Australian Party. So he was heavily involved with that. But, he was a real strong mentor for me in terms of exercising my constitutional rights, because it's a whole process. Someone who's never gone through the court system doesn't actually realise how corrupt the system is. So that was a huge, for a 30-year-old, that was a huge, huge eye-opening experiencing, realising that everything is infiltrated. It's infiltrated in such a way that people just can't get out. And the easiest thing for them to do is to plead guilty. And, they get their way. So from the police up to the courts, I don't really truly believe that there was a single judicial officer that was actually, fairly assessing. Well, of course they won't, because if they actually read the law, they would have seen that it wasn't a jailable offence. Yep. So every single judicial officer overlooked that. Some of them overlooked it because they're so ignorant. They just rely on you to say, yes, Your Honour, no, Your Honour, please, please, please. Or others are really, they are quite cunning and they know exactly what they're doing.
I can understand that why some politicians wouldn't want to touch this, because they're looking at it and say, well, she broke her quarantine restrictions and blah blah blah. But when there's draconian laws being not even laws, directions being directed at citizens, there is a certain level of civil disobedience that needs to take place. I mean, that's our founding fathers here in Australia and in countries around the world accepted that was part of our society, and that's why you are able to peacefully protest in the streets and do different things, because you do need to be able to push back against draconian measures being enforced by governments at the time. But when we discuss the court cases where we're at the point we're at now, you found, when I spoke to you on the phone, that the lawyers that you were getting weren't up to the task either, and you actually had to self-represent in the end. Is that right?
Yeah, so all the lawyers that my mum and I had reached out to in South Australia, because they have to be under the state jurisdiction to represent you, or operating under the state jurisdiction, they all said that it's very likely that I would be doing more prison time at that point in time, or that they didn't want to touch the case because it's COVID and they don't know the law, and the law is ever changing because it's not law.
It's not law, so they can change it.
So no one wanted to touch it because it would damage their profile. And this is how the lawyers work. They operate in a way where you are the last person that they act for. So firstly, they act for their firm. Secondly, they make sure that the bar, so they can keep their license, so they represent the bar. Thirdly, they represent the court because they're an officer of the court, so they have to protect the court. And last comes you, the paying client. So you are at the bottom of that food chain, and they have absolutely no interest in representing your interests. In fact, every lawyer that we saw said that you should plead guilty. So you're actually paying them money for something that you can do yourself without those extra zeros attached to the bill at the end. So it's very unfortunate. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, do you imagine if we applied the same sort of process to fitness instructors at the gym, that they only took on, people that were fit to instruct them?
Yeah.
Because anybody that had a chance of, not completing the fitness agenda because they didn't look like they were going to fit the mold, they would say, "Oh, sorry, mate, you're too fat to come into the fitness class. We need somebody who's going to be able to do my fitness training." I mean, apply it to anything. Like I brought the story to you, or anybody, I'll take it to anyone. And if I have to listen to it again and again and again, it'll be the least of my worries compared to you having to live it, Mariya. Right. But, you can take the COVID out of this, and you can just talk about the goddamn corruption and the lack of action from our politicians in these sorts of manners, and the level of lawlessness that we've got with these cowboys that are calling themselves, people that are in charge of this, right? So, thanks. And I was just about to say, I'd sent you that little link to that video, where like they find all these people, and then in the background we had 33,000 of those cases just thrown out. Okay, so withdrawn, because even the judge said, "Oh, look, there's not much there, just throw it out." But every single one of those people had to sit there and live with that, thinking that they were going to have to pay that fee. They end up paying the towers, the public people that were living in the towers in Melbourne. They got a $5 million payout across those 3,000 people out of taxpayers' money in the background, settled out of court for the wrongdoings that went with them. All of these things have been going on in the background, and the mainstream media, as usual, they are some of the most disgusting people in this country. And we know why, because they're all involved with the same people that own all of the media outlets, which is part of the Trusted News Initiative, which was formed just before the rollout of COVID, internationally. But you can take the COVID part out of this and just apply it to an Australian citizen, with our legal system, and every person, from the politicians, from the lawyers, from all of the levels, turning their back on them in case it wasn't winnable. And the more we understand about how our constitution has been, how we've been completely lied to with the Commonwealth of Australia and the Queen of Australia compared to the Queen of England, no wonder they're running for cover. And that, like you said before, Mariya, the one thing I've been watching, everybody is cheering as all of these senators step down. And I'm like, no, I don't want them to step down. I want them to be staying in power so that we can, when this shit finally comes out, we can hold them accountable in that position, because I don't know how it's going to work. Just tracking them down when they're just normal, everyday, supposed humans in this country. So, sorry.
It'll be significantly less. It'll be significantly less punishment, or whatever it is, whatever the retribution is for what they've done. It'll be significantly less, because now they're civilians. They're not in a life of servitude. So that's what happens when they step down.
Well, it really should be the politicians who are in our prisons, and some of those enforcers, shouldn't it? Some of those healthcare workers and police officers who full knowingly knew what they were doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look, a lot of people would be incredibly confronted with, a police officer pulling them over while they're driving, let alone a whole bunch of police officers pulling them over. Not only would they find that confronting, they would find being put into prison, a maximum security prison, placed in solitary confinement, confronting. But then you also had to go to court. But what's like even more confronting on top of all those things is you had to self-represent, where you had, no legal, you're not a lawyer, but you had to learn the law and learn the case and come up with an argument to represent yourself. How did you win? How did you go through all of that and come out at the end?
Yeah. I think this is a really strong message to give to everyone, and I can see one of our viewers has commented, "Thanks, Graham." So that's, I think, the main message coming out of all of this is that we really do need ordinary Australians taking their stand in court and exercising their constitutional rights. And the way to do this is not through the common law. I am a living woman, living man. Unfortunately, that doesn't work effectively. Maybe in some other states. I haven't implemented it in other states. I know in South Australia it does not work. So what you have to do is you have to use their law against them, or apply the law to the case and use that to your advantage. And so, again, thankfully, with the support that I had, and obviously a lot of, heaps of time spent in this, hours and hours of research, preparation and work, because all the advice that any lawyers would have given me, if I followed their advice, I probably would still be serving time in prison. So because they don't challenge the system, they don't challenge the law. They're purely there to work for the system, protect the court, and do a dirty deal in the background. Of course, yes, there are still some lawyers that aren't, there are still some decent lawyers, but at the end of the day, what you have to remember is they operate under their jurisdiction, the state jurisdiction, and the only true way that you can win almost any unlawful matter is applying the highest law of the land, which is the Constitution, the Commonwealth law, which overrides any state jurisdictions. And all of these directions, all of these orders fall on the wayside. They have absolutely no power when you apply your constitutional rights in the courtroom. But it's not just a sort of rule fits everyone. You have to use the state. You can use the state law. You apply your constitutional rights, and a lot of it is about how you carry yourself, and also knowing at the end of the day that it's not just necessarily for myself. It's for, if I win this, it's a win for Adelaide, South Australia, maybe even the world. I mean, my mum was getting notifications from her friends in France who were saying, have you heard of this girl that's being arrested and imprisoned? And she's gone, that's actually my daughter. So, yes, it's, we really, even if out of our fellow men and women, out of the movement, as so to say, freedom movement, or however you want to call it, even if out of that movement we had at least 20% go and fight the system in court, they would fall. They would 100% fall. But the problem is there's not many people that want to do it. There's not many people that can do it. And because the numbers are so few, you're going up against everything. I mean, they had 12 witnesses. They listed me for a 3-day trial. The day that I got released on bail, I had an anklet. So I was the highest level criminal coming out of that prison. When you're put on home detention bail, it's indefinite. So you have to go back to court to fight to get that anklet bracelet off yourself. You can't leave your home. So I actually went from prison back to prison. And that was the hardest thing to swallow, was realizing that I came out of prison, but I had to be on home detention. And there was now 4 charges that I had to effectively, that we had to fight. So yeah, that was, it was a real journey. Lots of things learnt through it, but, huge corruption. Australia, people don't realise how corrupt our system is, and South Australia is probably one of the most corrupt states, especially the police, the courts, and they need to get exposed. They need to, we need good people to challenge those systems, because until they do, not a lot is going to change. But I think a lot, even some of these things, you know, we had a huge win in the Supreme Court in Queensland, which is great. So I think a lot of things are coming out now, which is really, really positive. But it can only be done in numbers.
I want to ask you something specific to your case, because one of the, I guess, built-in systems of our legal system is if someone goes through this process and goes through the fight and comes out the other end and proves themselves to be correct, like you did, there's a precedent set. So for all other cases that come along from that point, that precedent is applied to their case. So you would assume that you going through this process has set a precedent. Did that happen?
Well, just going back on the word precedent, the reason it was so hard to fight the charges that I had is there were actually no prior precedents in South Australia. And I don't think there had even been any precedents. Well, I know there wasn't, because I did my research. We did our research, you know, a lot of us. So it was very hard to apply any case law in terms of COVID precedents to this matter. You could apply some other precedents like constitutional cases. But in terms of this setting a precedent, well, this is the funny thing. So this is where, you know, this shows how corrupt our system is. So even though the court actually acquitted me, which means that it's being recorded that I'm not guilty for the charges, and the charges can't be reinstated because the court's made that final decision, I'm still waiting for a verdict from the court to confirm that this was a case of malicious prosecution, false arrest, and unlawful imprisonment, because that's actually what it is. That's actually what it was. And that's something that needs to be announced on the public record. So they're covering, obviously wanting to cover everything very quickly so that it doesn't get exposed. But in terms of can you go somewhere and find this as a precedent of a winning case, I don't even know where you would look, because they purposely make it so hard for you. But I guess, yeah, in terms of police of South Australia versus Mariya, it was a losing case for South Australia Police. But in terms of how it's being recorded, that's another question.
How long has it been since spinal cord's been completed?
So it started in December 2021 and the case ended in August 2023. So a year and a half of my life was robbed. I couldn't leave the state. I couldn't apply for work. I couldn't, you know, do anything really, because I was locked into having to go to our court hearing almost every day. Not every day, almost every month.
And so that's been 9 months and you still haven't got a verdict yet?
No, a verdict has been announced in the sense of that I'm not guilty, but they're not actually wanting to define what are the reasons for why that decision was made.
I've been through court myself, you know, through family court. And did you find once you got your not guilty, did you find that after all the trauma and everything that you've been through, because I never obviously went to prison or anything like that, but you had to go and experience that, unfortunately. Did you find that no one wins in the end, even though you won, you didn't win?
Look, there was a lot of things that were on the line in terms of, you know, the impact it had on me socially, reputation-wise, my friendship circles, opportunities that were missed, you know, relationships. It's my, you know, prime years, you could say, that I lost that I'm never going to get back. But in terms of winning against SAPOL, it is a win. You know, I do see it as a big win in terms of what did it take to get there. I mean, it's hard to really even explain in words. the impact that it had on my family, you know, on my mum, on our lives. Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. Well, at least it feels like a win for you. At least it feels like you've still got that. Well, I won that one, thank goodness. Because
definitely a win in terms of winning it. You know, winning against the state. I think that's a really good win.
Good. I'm glad that you got at least to feel that. I'm terribly sorry that you had to go through that experience for really just trumped up BS nonsense that everyone knows it is. And even people who are, you know, 10 times jabbed and followed every rule, that they all know I would say most people know it's been a BS situation. And I think I'm glad that you got through it. I'm glad that you didn't have to, you know, get returned back to prison. But
that was never an option.
No, but hey, it's like a long drive off a short bridge or something like that, right? In the end of it, I think, you know, I agree. I hear that. So no, good on you.
Did you ever happen to catch COVID?
Never.
I'm probably the same boat as Marie. I actually had the cure for it. The HR department, like I like this HR lady, the HR department where I'm from, they didn't like me because I kept telling everybody at the work site that I actually had the cure for COVID, and they would quite often tell me to shut up. And because I told everybody, if you don't stick a stick up your nose, you can't catch it. So
don't take the test.
You are done. And they were like, just don't. It's not that simple, Jody. I said, it is. I said, if you don't stick your stick up your nose, you can't catch it. Literally can't catch it. So I cured it. And I told everybody that. And my HR was quite often known to tell me, Jody, it'll come to a point where you keep talking this shit that we're going to have to do something about it, all right? And I'm just like, well, I would have thought you got me in here to give me some sort of certificate for being the person who finally cured it. And you're reprimanding me. The system is unfair. I mean, that's where it is. Like, I just want to say, while I've got the mic unmuted, thank you. Not only did you fight it, you beat it, you didn't get jabbed, you stood for something which most people in this country do not anymore. You stayed the course. You did it yourself, you know, with limited support of people that we pay and elect to do so. And then out of all of that, we can have this conversation with you not that long after the trauma, and you're still doing it with a bubbly smile on your face that makes us comfortable enough to even joke about it, mate. And that is, you know, that is the reason why when I saw you on Jason's show, I was a bit on Jason the day. It was 2-for-1 day for our national 2-for-1 day that we did. And I had met you earlier in the day just by chance, just going around shaking hands. And later that day, Jason had snuck off and he was doing a live with a young, pretty face. And I'm like, oh, Jason, you old dog, what's going on? So I was like this at him for a couple of days until I got home and actually watched the live. And I'm like, holy crap, he just broke something, you know, that needs to be told wide, you know. And I waited, and, you know, I reached out to you straight away afterwards, and, you know, Ryan, I said, we need to find the right people to get to the middle, you know, because even though Jason is the middle, you know, we needed to make sure the right people heard this story again, because I don't want you to have to tell it 10 times, but I want every person to make sure this story on this channel is heard as many times as it needs to be till someone has the steel in this country to stand up for the people that this has happened to so often. You know, this is not the only story, but it's a good one to tell.
Yeah. And I like it because it does have a somewhat, you know, happy ending at the end of it. You know what I mean? Like, you got through it. You're still pretty positive, and you know, you're happy as well, just as Jody was saying. So, you know, hats off to you, because court's hard. Court is hard. And you said you had 20 hearings, around about roughly 20 hearings in a course of a year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hectic, because I too went through very, very many hearings very, very quickly. My battle lasted for 7 years though, but I know what you're saying too, because the amount of time, the amount that you have to prep for each hearing, okay, and then if they throw a curveball at you, then basically it gets adjourned, and then you have another hearing, and so you're continually like fighting back at what that you're trying to clear your name every time they come up with something again against you. So that's what takes so long and takes a ton of time, a ton of money, and everything that you have. So you
and
should
the
be.
other thing is that people don't realize, like, it is literally a circus. So you cannot, like, you have to go in there and you're literally dealing with clowns.
Yes.
Because they want you to be part of that circus that they're playing. And when you don't play their game, there's not a lot they can do, because they start to go, wow, you actually, you know your stuff, or you understand your constitutional rights, or there's some dominant force behind this girl who is teaching her to do what she's doing.
Yeah.
And it's all about a game of tennis. That's what I was taught, who has the last hit. So if you can keep hitting back at them,
that's right,
you can win. But the other thing is the amount of hours and prep that goes into a hearing that lasts sometimes, 5 or 10 minutes is a joke, to the point where they open your case and they read you the wrong case, which I had. At a hearing, they started reading someone else's case.
Oh my God.
So these are the kind of people, uneducated people, in terms of, I'm talking the judges that we're dealing with. They're absolute, a disgrace. A disgrace to South Australia, a disgrace to Australia. There is no justice. And it's always guilty until proven innocent, and that was very much the case with I had to prove my innocence.
Nailed it.
And I had to prove it to the population. Everyone who was the COVID believers, who thought I was a COVID denier, and to this day we don't actually know what COVID still is, and now it's being told, we all know that it's just a cold, but it was at the height of the fear and the brainwashing, I guess.
Wow.
You need to write a book or something. I mean, it's one thing to come on a podcast, but the more ways that you can document this story, the better, I think.
So I don't want to ruin your chances of that, Maria, but Monica Smith, is it, that you were telling about this story?
Yeah.
Didn't she already write a book, and she's now tripping up and down the coastline telling? Is it the same person, or?
That's what I'm hearing.
Telling it's the same person.
Yeah.
Same person wrote a book about how horrible she was treated during the time when she was trying to get out there and fight for the people. Now she's got a book and she's doing a tour up and down the coastline telling everybody about it. So save your book story, mate. Maybe just release a pamphlet or something.
If you know any good, honest journalists, please send them my way.
Or you could you could write an article in the Spectator telling your story.
Yeah.
If you can write your own article, you can be your own journalist, and then you can sit there. And Stephen's released has a few articles put out in the Australian Spectator magazine.
Okay.
And you've got what is it, Quadrant as well? There's Quadrant.
Yeah, there's a few of them out there. Quadrant, Cauldron Pool.
Cauldron Pool will be pretty good.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised at how easy it is for you to get published. I mean, I give advice to people all the time. Hey, why don't you write an article for one of these publications? And people think it's above them and it's only for notable people. It's not. It's for everyday people. And if you've got a good enough article or a story to tell, it can be a good way to get in front of more, I suppose you would say, notable people like journalists and politicians, because they read stuff like that. And it gets across.
Sorry, Stephen. That's what the politicians, that's what the journalists on our side of the centre rightists. That's what they do. That's what they read, those kind of articles. So then they might like your story, pick you up, and you could be put on Sky News or something like that for an interview. Like, it's just that's how you do it.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, the ACA's got some really cool links with the with some independent media too. Some of the bigger ones out of the Canberra region and stuff like that. Obviously, you've got the Lighthouse, which is the sort of conspiracy paper that goes internationally around the country. Nationally around the country. There's plenty of places for the story to be told and lead them back to that. So this is the ACA stuff at the moment. 33 odd, the Lion Council of Australia, but that we're trying to work together to do this, to make sure that everybody can continue to find a home as they wake up. The biggest thing for people as they're waking up to stories like this is that they, we're series 17, episode 32 into this, drama, and to try and condense for the sleepers what's been going on, where we're up to, for a quick catch up is very hard for them. So we need these sort of localized places where they can go to and absorb as much information that's available to them, because the reality is, I can say World Health Organization pandemic preparedness treaty pretty easy for a guy with a list, but what does that mean to someone that's had their head shoved in the sand for the last 3 years while this has been going on? Not much. So your story, even in short text, Mariya, would be well represented for people to lead them back to something like this, where they can see it in long form.
Yeah.
Got a question here from Adam asking about where to send an article to, say, for example, The Spectator. Off the top of my head, it's editor@spectator.com.au. Yeah, that goes directly to Rowan Dean. And if you go on the Spectator website, it will have that there. You just say, you just search in letter to an editor or something like that. Any publication around the country, you can even send it into the major newspapers. They probably are not likely to run it, but any publication should have, especially at the bottom of their website, it will say letters to the editor or make a submission or something like that. You'll be able to find that email so you can send these articles in. So it's an extremely powerful way to get your message across, because podcasting is one thing, but you need to do it in all different sorts of avenues. So as much as you can get this out there, and if you do have a cracking story like you say, Adam, then try. And sometimes you don't get a response, but if you keep trying different, it's kind of like fishing in a numbers game. You throw the bait out there enough, you might get a bite. So and that's all it takes at the end of the day.
He's a shit fisherman, mate, so he probably won't be able to throw it out there and get a bite. I've had Adam's a mate of mine. We combined and got a house together down for the Canberra rally the other day, and that's how we met. Before that, we'd never met before, but we just said, look, let's not trying to work it out. Let's just hang at the same place and hang out. I was Big Spoon, for the record, and he actually did a live that morning and told me the story of what happened to his wife, and what the medical system did to her and how close she was to death. And then, the other side of it, they basically went, oh, look, we just cut some stuff out and look, it stopped it. So you're better now. What are you whinging about? And they tested the parts that they cut out, and it wasn't that. And so they just left her, as she was with a big, it stopped the problem. So, that's the brief summary of Adam's story. One of the most horrific things that I've heard, that the medical system is failing. So, obviously Mariya is telling us the story of the legal system failing, and Adam's story is the medical system failing. It is disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting. And, I don't blame his wife for not, wanting to have it told. And I think obviously she's allowed me and Adam to put it on a live with my limited viewerage. But terrible story.
And look, we're speaking about other forms of media, but at the end of the day, once this is done, there's a link, a Rumble link of this. There's a YouTube link. Rumble's probably the best. Send it out to people. We say it every week for people to share our content. If you really like what Mariya has said tonight and the platform that we've given her to tell her story, then please share it out. Share it to everyone, even if you have to email it or drop it directly into people's messenger inboxes or wherever social media that you use. If you feel that this story has to get out there, then unfortunately it's up to you in a lot of ways. We can only go so far to get this message out, but if you really want people to hear it, then we all need to share it and just take that link. I would suggest the Rumble more than any of our other platforms, and we're on everything. We're on, YouTube, Spotify, all the Apple podcasts and everything like that. But I would suggest use the Rumble and share it out, post it on your social media, whatever you need to do. If you think this is important, then get it out there. But Mariya, thank you very much for sharing your story tonight. It really is a horrific story, and I admire you for being able to tell it with a smile on your face a lot of the time, because no one should go through what you've just gone through. But what's the final message that you want to get across to the audience after telling your story tonight?
I've got a few. One that I was reminded by a good friend is, remember, if in my instance, I wasn't actually labouring under any infectious disease, so the government has no authority over you if you are not labouring under an infectious disease. Mm-hmm. And you can apply this to any COVID-related situation, scenario. So at the end of the day, you know, a lot of us were treated as these infectious people, but yet there was no actually proof of any infectious disease. So just keep that as a good point to know. But really, don't give up. We all have our constitutional rights. Remember that. At the end of the day, you know, try if you can represent yourself and get the help that you need. There's a lot of resources out there now, a lot more than there was 2 years ago. Even traffic offences. I think if everyone really, you know, fought the system, because so many of these things that they are doing are unjust, you know, they're infiltrating through every level. So any pushback, you know, cash, use cash, don't use your ATM card. That's a really, really good thing that we can do. So whether it's in a big or in a smaller way, we all have an impact in terms of the world that we want to be living in. So I think the biggest message is, especially for people my age, stand up for what's right, stand up for what's true, because at the end, the truth always wins. And it has won in this instance. And I believe that doors will always open if you stand on what's right.
And Jody, it's good advice from Mariya. I think everyone should get politically active in some way, it's not all about running for politics. You can get active in different ways. And that's what you're doing with the Aussie Fight Back Club and National May Day and everything like that. Maybe just as a final comment from you, let everyone know what's coming up and what you've got planned.
Yeah, you can follow me across all the platforms on Aussie Fight Back Club, basically grassroots movements of getting people activated to fight for themselves and be their own saviors. Get off your knees. Nobody's coming to help you. And the longer you continue to stay there, the longer you'll realize that they will continue to do what they are doing and have done for a very, very long time. I am guilty. I have karma to pay for being asleep at the wheel, and I will repay that before my last breath is taken. I also like to remind everybody, I have a mental health company that I work on the side, because this has taken a toll on a lot of people before, during, and after it. Families and friends and workplaces are toxic environments of I told you so, even now as the information comes out. So I like to make sure that spiritual, physical, intellectual, financial, and emotional are the 5 key things for balance in our lives, that if we get them right and we put an equal amount of time into all of them, that we might have the stability that will give you the strength holistically to fight the battles that we are seeing right across the thing. Because if you are too weak in the mind, or too weak in the knowledge, or too weak in physically to actually stand your ground under the stress of the anxiety and depression that these sorts of situations bring up, then you will not want to do it. You will say, I'm guilty. You will say, Your Honor, just let me live my life. I'll pay my fine. I'll do my time, whatever. Just let me live. All right. So that's why I want everybody to know that if you ever need anything to reach out outside of it, it's all good to say power and fight, but you need to be able to look after yourself in this, because it's been a long battle so far and we've got a long way to go.
Okay, Mariya, this is the final segment of the XCandidates. Normally we're a very political podcast because that's just the waters that Adam and I swim in, the swamp that we swim in. And we have a final segment called Build Your Own Fantasy Government. So I don't know if this is going to be applicable for you, but I don't want to not give you the opportunity to do it, because you might find some fun in doing it. But the idea is you're in charge of the next Parliament of Australia. You can pick 5 or 6 people. It can be anyone, current politicians, former politicians, experts, maybe some friends that you've made through this process that you think would be good leaders of this country. But you, Mariya, you can choose 5 or 6 people to head up the next government of Australia. Who do you choose?
Oh, gosh, this is a hard one. I don't know if we can put our faith into people. Can we get our dogs to lead the country? I think we would be in a much better situation. Who would I choose? I think I would definitely choose. Let me just.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of people pick Alex Hantig, but you've written him off.
Do they have to be currently alive?
No, it can be anyone.
Okay, well, Gandhi would definitely be one of them.
Gandhi. Okay.
And so I think a lot of this stuff that a lot of freedom people forget is that we really have to fight peacefully. So it's not about, doing it in a manner that's aggressive, because that's where we unfortunately lost this game. And I think we've all been at fault of doing this in terms of going up against authorities and conversations we've had with family and friends. It's when you take an approach that's less aggressive, you have more power over the situation. So Gandhi, yes, I think he did that really well. I definitely would put my mum up to the table. I think my mum would do really, really well. Darren Dixon, yep, you're getting a special mention. You're right up there, Darren. Darren saying Jason Miles, maybe, perhaps. They're the ones that come to mind.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's a good one from Mum. I think that's the first time we've heard anyone say Mum, but I like that.
Well, she gets a special mention for sure. I couldn't have done it without her. So
we need to get your mum on next and hear her story, because I'm sure. I mean, her story is another side of this. You touched on it briefly. That just imagine what she was thinking. Obviously, you're experiencing this, but you know what's happening. She doesn't know what's happening. She has no contact with you, and she's probably just imagining anything. And I know as a parent, like, I couldn't even imagine having to go through that. So, I mean, sure, she's got a story to tell as well.
Yes, and she often gets mistaken for my sister. So you guys might be surprised when you see her. Not the person you're expecting, but yeah, I'm an only child, so we've got a very close relationship in that sense.
Yeah, well, very good. Well, thank you very much for coming on tonight, and thank you for everything that you did during this period. I mean, I'm not afraid to say that. A lot of politicians might be afraid to stand with you because of the blowback that they would get, but I'm not afraid to say that I think you did the right thing, and you pushed back against some draconian mandates and public health orders, and you didn't do it in a violent way. You didn't do it in a physical way. You just expressed what you think is, the way things that should be, and you fought it in the courts and you won. So that's the, I guess that's the silver lining of it all. And thank you for having the courage to go through that and to tell your story here tonight. So we really appreciate it.
And thank you, Jody, as well. Thank you for
thank you, Jody, for
your contributions and getting people on and doing what you do as well. So thank you.
Thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. No. Thanks, and thanks for sort of inviting me to come along and bounce off with this. I will try and keep giving you the guests, and I will not expect the honour of coming on with each of those guests. So but thank you for having me for the second time. And
we're low key trying to get you as we're trying to integrate you as a guest host or another host.
Yeah, well, one thing I can tell you is I like to talk. So I just said to my wife the other day, I was like, well, I've always been a talker, so I guess if I'm doing it for the right reasons now, and less people are saying, shut up, Jody, you need to shut up. So, I guess that's a good thing too. But thank you all. Look, I mean, this is what this is about. The tide is moving in the right direction for us, and we need to get those stories out. There's lots of them. We need to make sure that we call the people out. And I just want to put that message out there for every single one of you people out there that have played a part in this. We know who you are, and your time is up. All right. So either call yourself out and get on the right side of history right now. Otherwise, you are going to know about it when we get our hands on you, right? Because this is turning, and it's turning quickly. And when this isn't even real information yet, the stuff that I work on behind the scenes, when people start to see what the depth of the depravity of what's gone into this comes out, you better be on the right side of it. So if you were just a small pin in this, you better get changing really quickly. I warn you that now, because I said the things that are coming out in the next couple of months, it's going to be epic, and not in a good way. So thank you again for having me, and and for all of your viewers, share these videos from these guys far and wide. We need to get the middle activated. This is not a story of a microphone of always the 5% on the crazy left and the 5% on the crazy right. There is a big body of this country that is still in the middle, and they need to be hearing these stories, because the mainstream media won't do it.
Well, I don't know how 2 hours went so quickly, but it has. Mariya, I encourage you to jump on the Facebook and read some of these comments that people are saying about you, and some of them are really quite lengthy, so I haven't been able to put them on the screen. But there's a lot of love for you in the chat from people watching, and as I said to everyone who is watching, please share this far and wide. I say it to you all every week. It's been a great pleasure having our special guests on tonight. It's been a great pleasure to be able to do this with Adam, as we do every week. It's one of the highlights of my week, and it's a
me too, mate.
For me to be able to bring this information to all very special followers and viewers and the people that support us behind the scenes as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you.